All right, we got some others joining us, but we are going to get started because it's 101. My name is Anna Palmer. I am the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. Thank you so much for joining us for our monthly brown bag lunch discussion. As always, joined by John Bresnahan, Jake Sherman, and Andrew Desiderio to talk about all things Capitol Hill. As always, really just want to thank you for being premium members. We really appreciate it. I feel like the value of premium between some of the things that happened in August, where we were bringing you tweets, where texts rather, we were bringing some special editions, but going into the fall, it's going to be really well worth the value. So, as always, we're going to do 3 topics, and then we're going to get to your questions. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as possible. So today, no surprise, we're going to talk impeachment, we're going to talk shutdown, and the third topic we are going to get into is AI and the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's forum today, what we're expecting out of that. But before we get to those 3 big topics, Jake, I'm going to turn it to you because there has been some drama, shocking, not really, for House Republicans when it comes to the defense bill and having to pull the rule. What is the latest?
Yeah, so I'm still getting texts on the current status of this. We broke the news about an hour ago that the House Republicans have delayed a vote on the rule for the defense spending bill. Now, remember, Brez pointed this out to me earlier. He's got a better memory than I do, I guess. House Republicans left for August, having pulled the ag spending bill. They're now leaving. They are now returned from August 7 weeks later, 47 days in recess, and they're delaying a vote on the Pentagon spending bill. Now, why are they doing this? Conservatives, generally speaking, don't want to vote for any of these bills without knowing the top line number. They hate McCarthy, a whole host of reasons that are both real, imagined, and otherwise, which we've been writing about incessantly over the last couple of days. Now, here's the quandary for the leadership. The Republican leadership. McCarthy can't pass any individual spending bills. He's unable to pass an omnibus because he said he won't pass an omnibus, and he is getting pressure to not do a CR. So, like as he said, I was tweeting out a bunch from the meeting this morning, but as he said in there, he said, so if we can't do a CR, we can't do an omnibus, we can't do spending bills, what can we do? And that's a question that's bedeviled McCarthy, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how he's going to get out of this. I mean, I would sit Brez and Andrew is going to be talking about AI. That is not Andrew. That is an AI rendering. I'm kidding. No, but I would say sitting here today, September 13th, 16 and a half days before the funding deadline, I would say better than even chance of a shutdown. I think it's a vast understatement, better than even chance. One source told us in the leadership 75% chance. That doesn't sound ridiculous to me. And I would say, in addition to that, one thing that keeps not tripping us up, but something that Brez and I have been talking a lot about internally, and we've written about this too, is that there's no unifying idea about why this government is shutting down. Meaning, it's not because of Obamacare, it's not because of the border wall. It's like a whole host of ideas / major discontent with McCarthy, which has been the theme of his speakership since January of this year.
So let's get right into that. We'll go shut down first. And I actually think what you ended on there, and then I want to tee it over to you, Brez, and then we can bring in the Senate angle, Andrew, but is this idea of just like the speaker vote and trying to get him to, across the finish line, there wasn't a unifying theme. Different people wanted different things. And it wasn't as if they all coalesced around one thing that they wanted. We're kind of seeing that breakdown again, Brez.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican conference is a mess. I mean, I'm not sure McCarthy survives this, to be quite honest. So, I mean, part of this is that they're concerned over deficit. They're concerned over spending. Deficit for the first 11 months of this year was $1.5 trillion. The fiscal picture has gotten way worse for the government. They have a legitimate issue over spending. There's concerns about that. There's but they're now these conservatives who don't like McCarthy, as Jake said, they never like McCarthy. They are they're ready to shut down the government. It looks like they're ready to go. I mean, if you can't pass an agriculture bill, Like they couldn't in July, as Jake noted. And they can't pass the defense bill, which is roughly half of discretionary spending for the government. It's roughly half of all the federal agencies. I mean, I don't know where they go. I mean, McCarthy was talking about this morning. They try and do a package with Homeland Security and some other stuff. I don't see how they pass that. They can't even pass the rule. They can't even pass a rule. So, and they're not negotiating with the Senate on anything right now. They're not negotiating with the White House. This is just among themselves. So, I mean, they're in a really, unless he can get out of this spot right now, this is a disaster for House Republicans.
And it's a disaster for McCarthy, who cut this deal with Biden, particularly McCarthy, who cut this deal with Biden, who said he wanted regular order on spending bills. McCarthy is proving here to be not only did he abandon this deal that he cut with McCarthy, what he abandoned with Biden, now what he abandoned it for, he can't even hold true on that. So I don't know where McCarthy goes from here. I mean,
So let's talk about that, Andrew. I want to bring in you and into this discussion on the Senate. Obviously, such a different dynamic from the debt limit negotiations, where you had Senate Republicans really taking that backseat, saying, you know what, this is a negotiation between McCarthy, President Joe Biden, and his administration. Senate Republicans are really firmly, bipartisan, passing these bills, spending bills, the first time in 20 years that they've passed all of them.
Yeah, so they're on the first minibus this week. All they really have to figure out is amendments, and then they could pass it probably as soon as next week. The initial cloture on the motion to proceed vote yesterday got 85 votes in the Senate. I mean, you can't get any more bipartisan than that, really. So it's a really stark contrast we're seeing between the House and the Senate right now. And in the Senate, more broadly, you're seeing people like, Mitch McConnell really sort of hail the bipartisan nature of this process, whereas Speaker McCarthy is trying to go alone with Republican-only votes and thus far failing to do so. And the other sort of factor they have to all think about right now is short-term government spending. Obviously, government funding runs out at the end of the month. They're going to have to pass some sort of stopgap bill. McConnell has all but endorsed the White House supplemental spending package, which includes disaster relief, money for the border, as well as that critical Ukraine aid that McConnell has been very outspoken about. McCarthy is not on the same page when it comes to that. So we're really, what we're staring down here is a situation in which the Senate tries to jam the House and force the House to accept something that McCarthy doesn't want to even put on the floor. And that's where we could find ourselves with the government shutdown.
And Anna, could I add one more thing here quickly? I mean, I don't think this is in our list of things to talk about, but I think we should talk about it, which is FAA reauthorization, Farm Bill reauthorization, pandemic preparedness reauthorization. These are three major programs.
Defense authorization bill.
Defense authorization. By the way, sitting on the other side of all of this, and we'll get to impeachment in a minute, but as the House Republicans impeach Joe Biden, there is FISA reauthorization on the other end of this, which is just, we're talking about just such a massive, large set of issues that, 17 days ahead of the deadline, we're not talking about minor things, ag programs, FAA. These are major, major programs that, as Brez and I and Andrew and Anna, you and I have covered this for a million years. The Farm Bill is a very complicated bill with nutrition, ag policy, food stamp. Just a massive.
Yeah, right.
They're nowhere on the commodities provision. So,
yeah.
So let's just on that. So I think it's super important because you kind of lay all right, government shutdown in focus. You have also a ton of these other issues that are needing to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to extend them? Are they going to try to find a way forward before the end of the month? And then, but that wasn't enough. House Republicans decided that it was time to actually move forward on an official impeachment inquiry, which is clearly going to take up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to House Republicans, certainly, but also just the ability for McCarthy to negotiate with Democrats. I think, that becomes much, much more harder. Jake or Brez, you want to go?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Brez. Go ahead.
No, I did. Yeah, I definitely think it complicates everything with the Democrats. We wrote yesterday, and because we've heard this from Democrats, if conservatives moved against McCarthy early in the year, there was a sense that maybe Democrats would bail him out. Maybe they join with a number of Democrats, vote with across the aisle and vote to keep him in the job, vote against a motion to vacate it, vote with the majority of the Republican conference and support McCarthy. Now, there's no way we see that happening. I mean, he's in a real box here. But the other thing is, like, so it is this will poison whatever relationship they have with the White House and Democrats. You already see the White House being much more aggressive on messaging on this front. The White House counsel's office, the outside groups supporting Biden are attacking the case against the president, saying he did nothing wrong. You just have a bunch of allegations, insinuations. He did nothing wrong. So, or nothing warning removal from office. So, this is just going to soak up more and more time. They can't pass an appropriations bill. But think about this. They can't pass an appropriations bill, but they're going to have a special conference meeting tomorrow, House Republicans, on impeaching Biden, And
by the way, which they can't today. Today, they don't have the votes to impeach Biden, nor do they have the votes to open an impeachment inquiry. So McCarthy did this on his own, which, by the way, he slammed Pelosi for in 2019. And our old colleague and good friend Manu Raju said, press McCarthy on this, and he danced around it. And there's no legitimate answer here for McCarthy on this. Yeah.
I want to go to Andrew on this, because I actually thought the item you wrote this morning in Punchbowl News AM it struck me in such like a clear way. And we talked about this in the podcast this morning too, in the sense that, like, oftentimes behind the scenes, like the Senate, the House, they gripe about each other all the time. But it was really interesting to me, the fact that you have Senate Republican leadership, members of the leadership on the record, basically saying they think this impeachment thing is a distraction and the wrong move.
Yeah, I mean, that was basically Mitch McConnell's shorthand yesterday when he said, well, here in the Senate, we're focused on appropriations. We're focused on funding the government. John Thune said, we're focused on keeping the trains running. I mean, that is a not so veiled slap at the House. And you even saw some other Senate Republican leaders like Senator Shelley Moore Capito say flat out, I don't know what the basis is for impeachment. I don't see any evidence for it, right? You did see one Senate Republican leader, John Barrasso, the number 3 Senate Republican, come out in support of the inquiry. But aside from him, there really wasn't much support for it within the upper rung of Senate Republican leadership. And, to Anna's point, teeing this all up, a lot of this has to do with the fact that, there's so much to do right now in terms of the must-pass to-do list for both chambers. The idea that you could throw on the Senate an impeachment trial while they're trying to do all these other things, they just can't even fathom that right now, really. And they were expressing that quite openly yesterday.
Yeah. All right.
Could I add one? Could I just add one thing here, Anna? And Brez and I were talking about this morning, and frankly, since McCarthy has been floating this. And we've had conversations in the leadership about this as well, which is if they open an impeachment inquiry, which they have, I guess, theoretically, they are going to impeach Bill Biden. There's not going to be a point in which they say, oh, we have enough information, we're cool. Like before this impeachment inquiry, they indicated they thought Biden should be impeached. So like they are going to impeach Joe Biden. Will they get the votes? I don't know the answer to that. I don't have a crystal ball here, but I do think that they are going to impeach Biden. And by the way, like, not conducive for doing more work with the White House.
All right, let's move on to the third item of the morning, or the afternoon rather. Again, put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We also got a bunch that were sent early on, so appreciate that. But I want to talk about AI, right? I mean, this is the topic of the moment, a huge pivot for tech, probably in a way that they're thankful to be talking about something other than some of the regulations and China and other issues that have been more of mainstays over the past year or so. Andrew, you are covering for us today. Chuck Schumer has a big AI forum. Fascinating to me that it's happening. Tons of CEOs here, but of course, happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, behind closed doors, and senators aren't able to directly question the participants, which some senators were pretty openly griping about. You had Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's a member of Chuck Schumer's leadership team, basically say this is this is not the right way to do this, to say that, this is a way for industry insiders to influence how the industry itself is regulated. You saw Senator Josh Hawley on the Republican side express a similar sentiment. So there are a lot of concerns today about the format of this. But what Schumer has said to push back on it is that, look, this is just an effort to educate senators about this topic because, frankly, they really don't know anything about it. And it's an ever-evolving topic, and different committees have different jurisdictions when it comes to it. For example, I talked to Senator Mark Warner yesterday, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. He's really concerned about how AI can be used for, as foreign interference in our elections, for example. He said it could make 2016 look like child's play in terms of how the Russians used social media to, infiltrate certain American political circles and try to tip the election to Donald Trump. He's worried about the same thing happening through the use of AI. But you are seeing a lot of bipartisan work on this issue. Schumer views this as basically an education mission for senators to try to tee up a legislative package sometime in the next year or so. I've had people ask me, well, is the Senate going to vote on something before the end of the year on AI? They are not even close to that. So we've got some time before that happens. Next year is the goal.
All right. With that. Yes, Jake.
No, I'm good. I was just going to say, I mean,
I'm going to say from now on after I talk, just go to Jake has one more thought about this.
No, I would just say on this topic specifically, Anna and I were recently out in, I guess it wasn't so recent anymore, but we were out in California and we were having conversations with people both in the political and in the tech sphere, and people who kind of sit in the middle of both of those spheres. And it was just fascinating to hear how urgent these folks feel about Congress and the government, mostly Congress, getting their arms around AI in what they consider to be a smart way, which is maybe not what Congress considers to be a smart way, but that is just it can't overstate how big of an issue this is for the folks that are in this space.
Yeah, and I think the concern among industry that it's going to be onerous and really restrictive and look at AI in a probably more negative light, about more from a fear-based regulatory framework instead of potentially an optimistic framework of how this can impact, the job economy and all kinds of different things. So I think that you're starting to really see these tension points start to line up, and certainly the number of CEOs that chose to participate in this forum, probably because they aren't directly being questioned, probably because it is private, but I think also just is another layer of how important they view Washington's regulation vis-a-vis what's happening in the EU in particular. And that's what we're going to kind of see play out, I think, in the next several months. All right, let's get to questions because we have a bunch of them. I'm going to kind of condense several of them that came out earlier this week, which is one, a ton of questions about shutdown. I think we've kind of layered in the concept that we think more likely than not, there is a shutdown. I think the question though, I think is maybe twofold that we can go into, which is one, a lot of questions on how long do you think that a shutdown could actually be? And then if there's any thoughts about the 1, 2, 3 things that are really going to be in play that actually could get us out of a shutdown. So John, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, we were all discussing this morning. I mean, it could be I personally didn't think there would be an October 1 shutdown when we were coming back. Now I think there's a very strong likelihood of an October 1 shutdown. And I think there could be more than one shutdown. And I think a shutdown initially could be pretty lengthy. I do think the issue that will look, I think, it'll become, are we going to repeat what happened to Boehner in 2015? I think that comes into play. McCarthy's ability to remain a speaker and his ability to function effectively as speaker. I mean, I think this will go a long way to determine, and I think that will drive a lot of this debate. I do think McCarthy has a good point, though, and he's raised this, and the other leaders are the Freedom Caucus, the conservatives. They don't have an end game here. They want to cut spending, and they have a legitimate argument. There's a good argument, but they want to cut spending in a way that's just not sustainable. The McCarthy had cut a deal. They hated the deal, and then brought the House to the floor. Really, the House has not really functioned since that point. It really has done not much. The whole Republican conference, so they're mired in this thing. I think they have to make a decision whether McCarthy can stay. I really do. I think this will be the driving force, whether McCarthy can stay. Are they going to allow him the space to function effectively or not? And I think, right now, I don't know if McCarthy will get through this Congress. I'm not sure he gets through the year, to be completely blunt at this point.
So Jake,
Jake, I don't know what you think about this. But
following up on that, Jake, I want to just get to a couple of these things, which is, okay, so one, is there any scenario you see the government does not shut down?
Sure, anything could happen.
Yeah.
If the conservatives relent on their opposition to a short-term CR, if a short-term CR would, quite frankly, it makes the most sense of all the things that don't make sense right now. But a CR that goes until November 15th is the obvious answer here. So that would make the most sense. Now,
but it doesn't still resolve the problem. They still have to get a deal.
It doesn't.
Kicks the can down the way, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say, I don't know that I have 3 issues that can get them out of this. I have 1 or 2, maybe definitely border security, some sort of border security package, and maybe steep spending cuts, which the Biden administration is not going to do. And nor should they, to be honest with you, given that everybody, House Democrats, Senate Democrats, White House, are all on the same page, and McCarthy's on the outside. And by his own doing, by the way, he's promised things that he really can't deliver on. I would say whether McCarthy could last, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think that, listen, the majority of the conference wants him to last, but that doesn't matter, right? This is up to, and by the way, before he impeached Biden, he would have had Democrats helping him out. And maybe they still help him out because they don't want, somebody else's speaker. We don't care. I mean, it could be, we've talked about this all the time. Could it be Jim Jordan? Could it be Elise Stefanik? I mean, it could be a million different people if it's not McCarthy. Now, all that said, I don't know that he gets out of this. I have no idea. I mean, I don't feel confident. And by the way, I don't know that I don't know. I guess no one's asked him directly. He says he's not scared. Scared is not the right question to ask him. I mean, does he believe that he can come out? Is there a path? The question for McCarthy right now is there a path that he understands that could get him through this unscathed? And I doubt he would have an answer to that.
Andrew, I want to bring you in here because I think that we've focused a ton on McCarthy, rightly so, a ton on the House, because that's obviously where the dysfunction and the disagreement is when it comes to spending. But is there a scenario where McConnell or Senate Republicans get more engaged? Because right now they're kind of leaving McCarthy, or McCarthy's making his choice that it's kind of him and his alone to figure out.
Right. So what McConnell has basically said is that in terms of the stopgap short-term CR that they're going to have to do, the House should pass what they can pass, and then the Senate will take that and amend it, add things to it, do whatever, and then send it back. That's usually how the process works here. The problem with that is the things that the Senate would add to it, like, for example, the $24 billion for Ukraine that the White House asked for. McCarthy probably wouldn't put that on the floor, and it would jeopardize his speakership, number one, and number two, this is despite the fact that Ukraine aid still has overwhelming bipartisan support in both chambers, right? So this is a particular pressure point for him among the right flank of his conference, and you're seeing McConnell come out there every single day, including this morning, beating the drum on Ukraine, actively pushing back against these arguments from the Ukraine skeptical Republicans. He's taking the fight to them. And as we reported earlier this week, Senate Republicans, by and large, are backing McConnell when it comes to his willingness to take this fight to McCarthy, especially because they view Ukraine aid as really just as important as domestic disaster relief, right? They say this is not the moment to show that our support will be in question for the Ukrainians and send a signal to Putin, to China, to other adversaries around the world. So this is going to be something that they're going to have to resolve at some point, and we know where McConnell stands on it. He's made that clear every single day, and Senate Republicans, by and large, are backing him up on it.
All right,
can I add, because
yes.
I think you raised a great point, Anna. In 2013, the shutdown, which we all covered, McConnell eventually brokered the deal there after 16 days, okay? Because Boehner couldn't figure out how to get out of it. Paul Ryan had floated some plan at the time. That wasn't going to, he was Ways and Means chairman. That didn't work. I don't know if McConnell has that status now to do that. And it's not the same party.
Right.
And also one other point, if Trump is out there like saying stuff, the leading Republican presidential nominee, if he's out there saying stuff, that's just going to make this even more difficult.
Yep, I think that's a smart point, Brez. Okay, we have like 4 minutes left, so we're going to try to go as rapid fire as possible and get to some other things other than shut down McCarthy's future. FAA reauthorization in the Senate stalled. Is it alive? Where do things stand? Andrew, you want to go?
Yeah, so they haven't picked up from where they left off a couple of months ago. That's the long and short of it, right? There's this argument. It's not a partisan argument because you've got members of both parties on each side of it. This idea of trying to streamline the pilot training hours requirement as part of the FAA reauthorization bill. There's still this issue hanging out there, as we've reported, about the number of slots at Reagan Airport as well. And there we asked the Senate Commerce Committee just this morning for an update, and they do not have any updates about when they can resume this. And to Jake's point earlier, they're going to have to do some sort of short-term extension for the FAA's authorities past September 30th.
Okay, great. Let's get 2 more questions in here. One being on an auto workers strike. Are you guys hearing anything, nervousness about whether that could actually be happening or whether lawmakers could get involved?
Well, Brez,
Yeah,
we're talking about this. I think.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Brez.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion on the Hill. I think you saw Fetterman come out supporting, bashing the automakers and supporting the UAW. And there's a lot of discussion about this, especially like the Michigan delegation. But remember, this auto industry is spread out over the whole country, including the South now. So they're, I think they're concerned about it. I think they want to see how the administration handles it. I mean, I think they feel like there has to be a deal that can satisfy both sides here, but we've seen more aggressive labor across the board this summer.
Yeah.
You had the FedEx issue, you had the UPS issue. I mean, so there could be a strike, and I think it would be a disastrous moment for the auto companies to do that. But right now they're still kind of waiting to see what the UAW says and how the White House handles it.
Last question. Quite a few questions on taxes, tax extenders. Chairman Smith at Ways and Means. Any update here in terms of whether you think that could actually happen?
I talked to Smith yesterday. Yes, yesterday. He still hasn't moved his tax bill, which we've written about at length. He said he wanted to do it by his and Brez's shared birthday, which is in June. So I don't think here's how I think about the extenders. Listen, it's all caught up on the length of a government shutdown and the length of a short-term CR and whether there's some sort of year-end package for stuff to ride on. I am short a huge tax package this year and more long a tax package next year. I think
which would make sense because of the 2025 tax. Deadline.
Right. Listen, there's a ton of cats and dogs out there that need to be wrangled when it comes to tax policy. But listen, let's play this out a minute, and we only have a minute left. If there is a short-term CR until November 15th, then that would probably also then extend to December 15th. And then could you see a tax thing get into play? You probably can, right, Brez? I think that's fair enough. But listen, I asked some folks in McCarthy's office if they could extend the commodities title on the Farm Bill as part of a short-term CR, and they're like, the heavier this gets, the harder it gets to pass. You could argue this both ways, and I would argue it the other way if I had the gun to my head. But I think that it just becomes tricky.
Amazing. All right. On that note, we got to a lot of things today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will be back a month from now. Again, thank you so much for being premium members. We appreciate it. Have a good day. Stay safe.